The question is simple. Did Neanderthals have music? Did they sit around a fire and sing songs? Did they tap out rhythms on logs or animal skins? The answer is complicated. We don't know for sure. There are no recordings from 50,000 years ago. There are no written accounts. All we have are fragments of bone, stone, and the silent spaces where they lived. We have to be detectives. We have to look at the clues they left behind and try to piece together a picture of their world. A world that might have been filled with sound or might have been mostly quiet. This isn't just a fun thought experiment. The answer tells us something profound about who Neanderthals were. Music isn't just noise, it's about community, it's about emotion, it's about thinking in abstract ways. If Neanderthals had music, they were not the grunting, brutish cavemen we see in old cartoons. They were much more like us. Let's start with the most famous piece of evidence. It's a bone, a small piece of a young cave bear's femur. It was found in a cave in Slovenia called Divje Babe, and it has holes in it. 4 holes, to be exact. The bone is broken, so there might have been more. This bone is about 60,000 years old. It was found in a layer of dirt filled with Neanderthal tools. So, it comes from their time, from their world. Some scientists looked at this bone and saw a flute. The holes look deliberately placed. They are roughly aligned. You can blow into one end and cover the holes to change the pitch. People have made replicas of the Divje Babe flute. They can play simple tunes on them. The spacing of the holes seems to correspond to a diatonic scale, the do-re-mi scale that is the foundation of so much Western music. This seems like a smoking gun. A Neanderthal flute. Case closed, right? Not so fast. Other scientists looked at the same bone and saw something very different. They saw lunch. They argued that the holes were not drilled by a Neanderthal tool, they were punctured by the teeth of a carnivore. A cave bear or a hyena chomping down on the bone to get at the marrow inside. They point out that the shape of the holes is consistent with bite marks. They've done experiments. They've let modern carnivores chew on bones, and sometimes the punctures look a lot like the holes in the Divje Babe artifact. The debate is fierce. Those who believe it's a flute say the holes are too perfectly round, too well spaced to be accidental bite marks. Carnivores are messy eaters. They don't create musical instruments by accident. They also point out that finding 2 perfectly aligned puncture marks from a bite is incredibly unlikely. 4 is almost impossible. Those who believe it's just a chewed bone say that's wishful thinking. They argue that we are pattern-seeking animals. We want to see a flute, so we see a flute. They say the bone is too fragmented to be sure of anything. Maybe there were other random marks on the parts that broke off. They also point out that while the holes can be used to make music, that doesn't mean they were intended for that purpose. You can make a rhythm by banging 2 rocks together, but that doesn't mean every pair of rocks is a musical instrument. So the Divje Babe flute is stuck in a sort of scientific limbo. It's either the world's oldest musical instrument, a profound link to the mind of another human species, or it's a 60,000-year-old piece of trash from a hyena's dinner. We can't be 100% sure either way. It's a tantalizing clue, but it's not proof. Since we can't rely on a single, controversial object, we have to look for other kinds of evidence. We have to look at the Neanderthals themselves. What were their bodies capable of? Could they even produce the sounds needed for music or song? Let's start with the voice. To sing, you need fine control over your breath and your vocal cords. For a long time, scientists thought Neanderthals had a larynx, or voice box, that was positioned high up in their throat, like a chimpanzee's. This would have limited their range of sounds. They might have been able to make grunts and shrieks, but not the complex vowels and consonants needed for speech, let alone song. This idea helped fuel the image of the brutish, inarticulate caveman, but more recent research has completely changed this picture. The key is a tiny, U-shaped bone in the neck called the hyoid. The hyoid bone is unique because it's the only bone in the body not connected directly to any other bone. It anchors the tongue and supports the larynx. Its position and shape are crucial for speech and singing. The problem is it's small and delicate, so it rarely fossilizes, but we have found one. A nearly complete Neanderthal hyoid bone was discovered at a site in Israel called Kabara Cave. And when scientists analyzed it, they found it was virtually identical to our own. Its shape and the way muscles would have attached to it suggests that the Neanderthal larynx was in the same position as ours. This means, anatomically, there is no reason to think they couldn't produce the same range of sounds that we can. Their vocal hardware was essentially modern, so they had the instrument, they had the vocal cords, and the throat structure to sing. But having a piano in your house doesn't mean you can play Chopin. Did they have the brain to control that instrument? This brings us to the Neanderthal brain. We don't have any preserved Neanderthal brains, of course, but we have their skulls, and the inside of a skull keeps an impression of the brain it once held. From these endocasts, as they're called, we can learn a lot about the size and shape of their brains. Neanderthal brains were big. On average, they were slightly larger than our own modern human brains. But size isn't everything. The organization is what matters. Their brains were shaped differently from ours. They were longer and lower, while ours are more rounded, more globular. This difference in shape means some areas might have been larger or smaller than ours. The parts of the brain associated with language, like Broca's area and Wernicke's area, seem to be present in Neanderthals. Their brain structure suggests they had the neural capacity for complex communication. And music and language are deeply intertwined in the brain. They share neural pathways for processing rhythm, pitch, and syntax. If they had the capacity for complex language, they very likely had the capacity for music. But it's not just about producing sound, it's also about hearing it. Is there any point in singing a song if no one can appreciate the melody? We need to look at their ears. The tiny bones of the middle ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes, are what transmit sound vibrations from the eardrum to the inner ear. Amazingly, these tiny bones have been found preserved in Neanderthal fossils. Scientists have used high-resolution CT scans to create detailed 3D models of the Neanderthal ear structure. By analyzing these models, they can figure out what frequencies of sound Neanderthals could hear best. The results are fascinating. Their hearing range was very similar to our own. In fact, their hearing was most sensitive in the range of frequencies that are most important for human speech. This makes perfect sense. You need to be able to hear the sounds you and your group are making. This hearing range also happens to be the range where most music occurs, so let's take stock. We have a body that was capable of producing complex vocal sounds, a brain that was large and complex enough to control those sounds, and ears that were perfectly tuned to hear them. The physical evidence strongly suggests that Neanderthals had all the necessary equipment for music and song. The hardware was there. The question is, did they use it? To answer that, we have to move beyond anatomy and look at their behavior. What did they do? How did they live? Does their lifestyles suggest a need for, or a likelihood of, music? Neanderthals were not solitary creatures. They lived in small, close-knit family groups. They were cooperative hunters, taking down large and dangerous animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos. This kind of cooperation requires communication and social cohesion. You need to trust the person next to you. You need to feel like you're part of a team. In modern humans, music is one of the most powerful social glues we have. Think of national anthems, church hymns, campfires, sing-alongs, or the chants at a football game. While music synchronizes us, it makes a group of individuals feel like a single entity. It builds trust and fosters cooperation. It's a way of saying, we are one. Did Neanderthal groups need that same kind of social glue? Almost certainly. A coordinated hunt is more successful. A cohesive group is better at defending itself and caring for its young. Like music, or at least rhythmic chanting and vocalizing together, would have been an incredibly effective tool for building that group identity. We also have growing evidence that Neanderthals engaged in symbolic behavior. This is a huge deal. Symbolic thought is the ability to let one thing stand for another. It's the basis of art, religion, and language. For a long time, it was thought to be unique to Homo sapiens. But that idea is crumbling. We know Neanderthals deliberately buried their dead. This suggests they had some concept of an afterlife, or at least a deep respect for their lost group members. A burial is a ritual, and rituals are often accompanied by sound, by chanting or singing. We found eagle talons from a site in Croatia that were cut and polished by Neanderthals, likely to be worn as jewelry. We found shells with holes drilled in them, covered in ochre, a red mineral pigment. These weren't for survival, they were for adornment, they were symbols. They were a way of saying something about who you were. This use of symbols is critical. Music is pure symbolic expression. A melody doesn't put food on the table or keep you warm at night, not directly. It communicates emotion, it tells a story, it creates a mood. If Neanderthals were already thinking symbolically enough to create jewelry and bury their dead with care, it seems very likely that they would have also explored the world of symbolic sound. It's hard to imagine a mind that can appreciate the beauty of a polished eagle talon but has no interest in the beauty of a melody. There's another, more basic line of evidence, rhythm. Neanderthals were expert toolmakers. For over 200,000 years, they used a sophisticated technique called the Levallois technique to make stone tools. This involves carefully preparing a core of stone and then striking it in just the right place, with just the right amount of force, to knock off a perfectly shaped flake to be used as a spear point or a scraper. This process is not random, it requires planning, fine motor control, and a deep understanding of cause and effect. It also requires rhythm. The act of napping stone is a rhythmic one. Strike, turn, strike, turn. This rhythmic, repetitive motor activity is fundamental to toolmaking, and it's also fundamental to music. Could the rhythm of making tools have bled into other parts of their lives? It's easy to imagine a Neanderthal sitting by the fire, idly tapping two stones together in the same rhythm they used to make a spear point. From there, it's a short step to tapping on a hollow log or stretching an animal hide and drumming on it. Percussion is likely the oldest form of instrumental music. It requires no special technology, just objects from the environment and a sense of rhythm. Neanderthals had both. So where does all this leave us? We have one very controversial object that might be a flute. We have an anatomy that was perfectly capable of singing and hearing music. We have evidence of a complex social life that would have benefited from the bonding power of music. And we have proof of symbolic thought and rhythmic activity, the very building blocks of musical expression. The problem is the lack of direct, unambiguous evidence. Music made with the voice, with clapping hands, or by drumming on wood, leaves no trace in the archaeological record. It disappears into the air. This is the great challenge of studying something as ephemeral as music in deep time. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found a Neanderthal drum doesn't mean they didn't exist. They were probably made of wood and animal hide, materials that rot away over tens of thousands of years. Perhaps we are thinking about Neanderthal music in the wrong way. We are looking for objects, for flutes and drums. We are looking for things that fit our modern definition of music. But maybe their music was something different. Maybe it was more integrated into their daily lives. Picture a Neanderthal group returning from a successful hunt. Maybe they didn't sing a song with verses and a chorus. Maybe they moved together, chanting in a low rhythm, a sound that communicated both their triumph and their exhaustion. A sound that bonded them together after the danger of the hunt. Picture them around a fire at night. The fire itself has a rhythm, a crackling sound. Maybe one of them starts telling the story of the hunt. Not with words alone, but with sounds. The thud of a spear hitting its mark, imitated with a grunt. The cry of the wounded animal, a high-pitched wail. The other members of the group join in, clapping their hands, stamping their feet, creating a soundscape, a percussive story. This isn't a concert, it's a form of communication. It's a way of reliving a shared experience and reinforcing social bonds. Is it music? I think it is. We also have to consider their environment. The world of the Neanderthals was not a silent one. It was filled with natural sounds. The wind in the trees, the flow of a river, the calls of birds and animals. They were expert hunters and gatherers. Their survival depended on being exquisitely sensitive to the sounds of their world. A snapped twig could mean danger, or it could mean dinner. Humans are natural mimics. We imitate the sounds we hear around us. Is it so hard to believe that a Neanderthal might have imitated the call of a bird? Not just to hunt it, but perhaps out of simple curiosity or joy. Could the first songs have been imitations of the sounds of nature, woven together into a simple melody? So, if we broaden our definition of music beyond instruments and formal songs, the question changes. It's no longer, did they have music, but how could they not have? A species with a voice like ours, ears like ours, a brain like ours, living in complex social groups and thinking in symbols, would almost inevitably develop some form of musical expression. It seems to be a fundamental part of being a complex social hominin. Perhaps music isn't a recent invention of Homo sapiens. Perhaps it's much, much older. Perhaps the common ancestor we share with Neanderthals living 500,000 years ago already had a rudimentary form of song. Perhaps music evolved right alongside language, as two different ways of using the same vocal hardware for communication. For language to convey information, and music to convey emotion. The debate over the Divya flute continues. Maybe one day we will find another, more complete example that settles the question for good. Or maybe we will find other evidence, like etchings on a cave wall that seem to depict people dancing or singing. But for now, we are left to speculate. But the speculation is not empty. It's based on a rich and growing body of evidence from anatomy, genetics, and archaeology. And all of it points in the same direction. The old view of Neanderthals as primitive, silent brutes is dead. It has been replaced by a picture of a complex, intelligent, and deeply social people. They cared for their sick and elderly, they decorated their bodies, they buried their dead. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years in a harsh and changing world. They were, in their own way, a human success story. To deny them music is to deny them a key part of that humanity. it is to assume that they had all the tools for it: the voice, the brain, the ear, the social need, but for some reason never put them together. That seems unlikely. It's more likely, more plausible, and more consistent with the evidence that their world was not a silent one. It was filled with the sounds of their voices, joined together in some form of rhythm and melody. We can't know what their songs sounded like. We will never hear a Neanderthal lullaby or a hunting chant. But the clues they left in their bones and their stones suggest the music was there. And thinking about that changes how we think about them. And in a way, it changes how we think about ourselves. It suggests that the need to make music is one of the oldest and most fundamental parts of being human.